Welcome everyone to Gotham City Bulletin. I am Subject 879. As always, we have Torgo and Robert Wild with us, the only one without an alias, on the superhero channel. No, yes, the day ghost. Batman bought a living planet. Today, we are here to talk about Batman Ego and not other stories. We are just talking about Batman Ego. By Darwyn Cooke. Torgo, this is a book I picked up when The Batman was coming out. But you were kind of the one that recommended it to me because you're the only one I know of that has read this that I can think of. Obviously before this video.
Because I didn't read this book until a little after the first trailer came out, actually closer to when the movie The Batman came out. So I don't know, I guess I read it before you still. But
Oh, okay. I see. I thought you read it before then. So we must have read this around the same time. And then
probably,
I just heard you talking about it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I pitched this as an idea to review as a smaller story, since we started out with arguably like the biggest Batman story we could have started
the
with.
Batman story.
Austin, is our audio still good? Someone's phone buzz. That might have been mine.
Oh, it might have been mine.
Who knows?
I'll put mine on silent.
So, Torgo, I'm gonna have you describe Batman ego and explain to us the lore reason that man has an ego.
Right. How many Batman Arkham jokes can we fit in? No, so Batman Ego is the story written by Darwyn Cooke, fantastic artist. Actually, I think he got a start in animation, and I want to say Batman Beyond was one of the first things that he worked on before he worked on comics. I don't know if you guys know anything about that, but
if I can interject for a second, he started work as a storyboard artist for the new Batman Adventures.
That's
for like
what it was.
Four episodes. I don't remember which one. I think he's credited on a few Superman 2, and then he designed and animated the intro to Batman Beyond. And probably had more involvement with the show, but that's like his big contribution to the show.
Right. I was thinking mainly of like the Batman Beyond intro. I couldn't remember if he came on that show or before. But anyway, the story is written and drawn by Darwyn Cooke, and it's about Batman and on a
Batman book about Batman?
It's about a pretty bad night where Batman comes back to the Batcave, basically considering quitting being Batman. And then he sees this evil, or not evil, but like a kind of manifestation of his darker side come forward, and it's basically just a conversation between Bruce Wayne and this kind of representation of Batman. And it's plot-wise, it's a hard story to describe, but it's really mainly just a deep dive into like the psyche of Bruce Wayne and the difference between Bruce Wayne and Batman, how they contrast. And
structurally this reminds me of almost like one of those low-budget A24 movies, to use a modern example, where it's just like a guy in a room for most of it, and you get like a couple of flashes. Other words, it's really surprising we haven't adapted this yet. I feel like after Dark Knight Returns, this is one of the easiest stories to adapt into like an animated feature that's like 80 minutes.
Well, the thing about that is Dark Knight Returns is like a classic Batman story, and I had not heard of this story until Matt Reeves mentioned it as one of the inspirations for The Batman. Kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. That was one of the big things that, made me want to check out this book. And I think at the beginning of 2022, I finally read it, and I was just blown away by it.
It gets a lot done for how short it is.
Yeah.
And it's all introspective. Like, do you guys agree that this wouldn't be a bad starting place for a Batman reader.
I don't know if I would. I don't think I would say this should be the first Batman book you read.
Maybe not the first.
Not the first, like but maybe one of the
first to really get a grasp on modern Batman's characterization. I believe this was written in like 2000, but it feels very modern. This feels like it was very ahead of its time.
Yeah, no, it feels like maybe it informed how we write modern Batman in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
Go ahead, Robert.
I don't know if I have the story right. I think this was initially like a pitch for like an episode of Batman. I could have that wrong, but it was something that a lot of eyes were on that like thought, oh, like, wow, this is really good. And then he ended up publishing as a comic. I also don't know if I want this animated as a movie. Like, I don't know if I want this padded out to 80 minutes. Like, you could do this in 20. It has that Killing Joke problem where it's just too short for like a cool movie. And it also doesn't need to be adapted. There is that unfortunate mindset some people have of like, oh, these need to be adapted to like be legitimate or matter. And it's like, no, it works great as a comic. Comics work great on their own. Like, not everything needs to be adapted, but when they're done well, it's really cool and neat. I think you could do this in 20 minutes, like with that Batman Caped Crusader show coming out. However that turns out, I hope we get some news on that sooner rather than later. But,
yeah, hopefully.
Like what we know about like the noir tone they're going for, and with Bruce Timm's style, like I think, and that it's going to be a little darker than what animated series was. Like, I think this could be a great episode of that.
No, I don't necessarily disagree, but I also think I think this would be easier to flesh out than something like The Killing Joke, because it kind of starts in the middle of a Batman action scene, so you could just flesh that out, and then you just flesh out some of the dialogue later on, because this is a very dialogue heavy book. I think you could, maybe not 80 minutes, but this could be like a 60-minute thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Even like a 20-30 minute thing, but
yeah,
I don't know. That's not enough to sell a DVD.
Just do what you should have done with The Killing Joke and like adapt a bunch of these smaller stories into like shorts.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, that'd be good.
They should have done like The Killing Joke along with Ego and a few other like shorter stories.
The Day Ghost says Cook is one of those artists that always think of working way earlier than he actually was, because he's got such a classic style. Yeah, this absolutely looks like a book from maybe like the 70s or the 60s. Like, it's got kind of a modern take on the classic, maybe golden or silver era.
And I think for that classic style that he has, for that reason, he's really ranks up there as one of my favorite artists for Batman.
Oh, I love his take on Gotham and the villains.
It's just, yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful looking book.
Yeah, his art is gorgeous and very cartoony. It's not at all trying to look realistic. It's very in line. Like, it's different than like Bruce Timm's style, but it's definitely in that vein. Like, you can see like, oh, it makes sense that this guy was at least a storyboard artist on like Batman on stuff. Like, they definitely have similar sensibilities with their art.
Just look at this. This is a fantastic image.
One thing I am kind of grateful for that this wasn't an animated series is I think this goes a little darker than animated series would have been allowed to go.
Yeah.
Mainly with the catalyst for this story, which is the gangster who is so afraid of the Joker that he kills his wife and child and then kills himself. I forgot about that on this reread. So this is only my second time reading this. I don't know how many times you guys have read this, but I kind of forgot about that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, holy shit, like, we're going to that place.
No, yeah. And I think that show did definitely push it for its time, but there's no way they could have gotten away with
no way
this open. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen this trope somewhere else, but I can't name a specific example. But you have a guy, Buster Snibbs, who has ratted out the Joker, and Batman's pursuing him thinking that, oh, he's running away with the money. Like, he's already got Joker locked up, but he thinks this guy's trying to get away with the money, and then finds out, oh, he's going to the Gotham Bridge to try to kill himself, and then finds out he killed his wife and child already because he was so scared that the Joker would. And it's a really messed up place to start. And before that, this is a classic Batman story where he's kind of questioning himself at the start. Like he's wondering, like, am I making a difference? Am I effective? And then this horrible thing happens that just makes it 10 times worse. There's definitely shades of that in the episode I Am the Night, in the animated series that starts with Batman like questioning himself. They're similar, but this obviously goes to a much darker place and a very different direction with the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's also one of my favorite animated series episodes. It's pretty underrated, and I think this is almost like a better version or a more like in-depth version of that episode of just like Batman like doubting himself and then, you know, digging deep and then coming to realize why he does what he does and, you know, like getting back and
they go in very different directions. And, you know, this whole story is Batman talking, like you said, to like the personification of his fear, of his ego. It's like a demon. This story suggests the idea of Batman having like a split personality. I think it's Hugo Strange who gets a little cameo and throws that idea out there. Two-Face is referenced later, of course. So it's just one of those classic stories dealing with just the dichotomy of Bruce Wayne and Batman, and, you know, are they two separate entities? Are they two sides of the same coin? However you look at that. And also, it's Batman talking to this other version of himself in the cave. But at the start of the story, not only has he gone through this incredibly traumatic event, but he's also like literally bleeding out. Like they make a note of that, that he has been injured. And so there's already kind of
could just be hallucinating. Yeah,
exactly. There is that built-in conceit. Like we're not necessarily being literal that this is supernatural. Like that's up to the reader to decide.
Well, and interesting enough, this makes for kind of an interesting follow-up review-wise of Dark Knight Returns. Because Dark Knight Returns also does that, where there's scenes where it feels like he's talking to something else in that cave, and this kind of personifies it, at least in Bruce's head. Because I mean, I can only assume that most of this is taking place in his head.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I don't know if that story inspired Darwyn Cooke at all when he was writing this, but it's very similar, where it's like a demonic bat in that book that he keeps seeing and talking to, and reading that back to back with this, like you can definitely see some parallels. Like that, they definitely play well together for that element.
And I appreciate the narration, but if I had one complaint, I don't know if you guys had this, but sometimes this font that they use is really fucking hard to read.
I had that issue as well.
I have that with a few words, but it's been forever since I've had to like write cursive for school or anything.
Yeah,
it's like I don't think most people use. I think I just still use it to sign my name.
I'm terrible at writing in cursive. I can read like 90% of this fine, but there are a few words here and there that are like, what?
Yeah, I found myself rereading a few parts, but for the most part I was fine with it, and stylistically I actually kind of like that it's written in cursive. I just think it fits with the classic old style.
No, yeah, for sure. So he, you know, the thing with the criminal happens, you know, where he kills himself.
And there's a great reference to because the guy Buster Stibbs, he mentions another criminal who warned him, like, "Oh, Joker knows you ratted him out." He mentions Chucky Saul, which is a nice little reference to the movie Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, and that's the first gangster to be murdered by the Phantasm at the start of the movie, voiced by Dick Miller.
Yeah, another sign of things to come for the channel, because we're talking about doing that movie soon.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I did jot down a few notes, not very many. But that was one of the things. I don't think I've ever heard Chucky Saul referenced in anything other than Phantasm.
Yeah, this is a direct reference to that.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Was this at the time considered like canonical to the main Batman universe? Or is this just kind of an Elseworlds?
I feel like this was always kind of considered an Elseworlds, but I'm not sure.
I think it, like many Batman stories, when you get to the 2000s, it's canon if you want it to be, and it's canon if DC wants it to be. Like, it doesn't contradict or change much. But I genuinely don't know if this was originally published with the Elseworlds label or just like as a book. Because I think New Frontier, which is like his magnum opus, that's like the big DC story. No, before. I think that's published as Elseworlds specifically, but this one I'm not sure.
Okay. I still got to read that. I've heard great things. I like how he draws this when we're going through like the flashbacks. It's a beautiful like splash. So then he gets to the cave and he kind of starts hallucinating. How do you guys feel about the, for lack of a better term, bat demon in this? It looks scary, but it also looks like something that looks like it would have been an animated series.
Yeah,
I love it. Yeah, I love it. I love the design of it, and I just love the whole
for those that haven't read
concept around it.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to note that it's kind of like framed as a story where Bruce Wayne basically has an argument with Batman, but the demon that he's talking to is more so a manifestation of Bruce Wayne's own fear than it is like a manifestation of Batman. And obviously those things are connected, and the story, gets into that, but I like the idea of Batman and Bruce Wayne being two completely different entities. Like on paper, that's a cool concept, but it also, I think it's a lot more complicated than that. Like, I don't think that should be like the canon interpretation of Batman. I don't think he has split personalities. I think it's a good storytelling device for this specific story, but I don't think Bruce Wayne has DID or anything.
I kind of read it as this is his fear, his repressed fears and emotions representing themselves as something that he can identify with, which is Batman. Because I like that the main thing that this thing, for lack of a better term, his argument is, no, we need to start killing some of these people.
Yeah. Which is not something that I think Batman would argue for. Like that's why it's specifically said that like this isn't Batman, this is Bruce Wayne's fear.
Well, and why would he be tempted to kill? It's because he's afraid. It's because he's afraid of all the other people, Joker, whoever could kill. It's another classic Batman story that touches on like, okay, we were doing good fighting crime, and then all these other freaks and weirdos started coming up, like the Joker, and we need to do something about it. Like and they keep getting out. Like these are big deal. Again, lots of Batman stories just deal with that. Like, does Batman inspire like these other masked criminals, like these more insane super villains? And like, is the Joker his fault? Of course, they reference the classic Red Hood story later with him falling in the vat of acid and becoming the Joker. So it's also dealing with that. Like, does Batman feel guilty for creating the Joker? So these are all things he's afraid of.
So if I had one thing I might have changed about this, I don't know how you guys feel about them using the Killing Joke as the kind of canonical origin for Joker. I almost would have just kept that vague. Like, is it my fault that I brought this madness to Gotham? But don't show the Red Hood where it is more arguably his fault. Keep it vague where it's like, this guy came to town after I started. Did he come to town because I'm here? Or was it coincidence, like he would have come even if I'm not here?
Well, I mean, in general, I kind of prefer Joker's origin to be vague for the most part, but I think for this story, it's fine. It works for what the story is.
I think your interpretation is totally valid and is definitely the case in something like The Dark Knight, where we get no origin for the Joker. That movie's all about, like, am I the reason the Joker has come here and is causing all this chaos? But I think it works in the context of this comic, especially since there's just so much reverence here for Batman history, Batman comics, and the Red Hood origin. I mean, that doesn't go back to Killing Joke. That goes back to the 50s. Like, that starts in the Silver Age. So I don't think it's looking at Killing Joke specifically. It's just like, yeah, this was Joker's origin way back in the day. So,
but the problem is that it's specifically calling back to the Killing Joke. Joker origin
with the Red Hood.
Yeah,
that goes back to the 50s.
But in the 50s, he's just a criminal, right?
No, there is a red. I don't remember. It might have been like late 40s or early 50s, but the Red Hood is like an early Batman story, and the mystery in that story is who's the Red Hood, and the twist is, oh, it's the Joker, and then he tells Batman, yeah, I was this guy called the Red Hood, and blah blah blah, and then Killing Joke was looking at that and expanding on it and added the tragic backstory.
Right, but they specifically do the Killing Joke. He falls in the acid because
that goes back to the. Yeah, and that goes back to the early story. The Killing Joke just makes it more tragic and kind of expands on it.
Okay, because I mean I haven't read that 50 story, but this is like page for page just the Killing Joke one.
Mm-hmm.
Doing the more tragic, like where it's more explicitly like, no, Batman kind of caused this.
Yeah, I want to compare them back to back because in Killing Joke, if I recall, the Red Hood is cornered by Batman and he jumps into the acid, which I think is what happened in the original story. And here it goes with that version where it's like he trips and falls back into it. So it's there's several different variations on like that encounter that I've seen in comics and media.
Yeah, well, that's why I went to Killing Joke, because he noticeably he trips. Which is the Killing Joke one.
I could be wrong. I think he jumps in Killing Joke, but I could be misremembering that.
It's been a while since I've read that, so I don't remember.
Confession time before we eventually get to that book. I don't love that book. I think it's okay.
Yeah, I think that'll be an interesting review when we get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think that whole stuff with the Joker works for this story, and like the internal like struggle with Bruce Wayne thinking that you know it's the classic question of does Batman does he create the villains that he fights?
Well, but see, if you're going to use that specific answer or example, then the answer is kind of yes. Like, he wouldn't have fallen into those chemicals if you hadn't been there.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I don't even think it's a problem, but I think it's a much more interesting debate if it's vague, where it's like, well, I can see why Bruce would think this way, but we don't have any concrete evidence to suggest that he is the one that caused the Joker. But when you straight up show him being the reason that Red Hood falls into those chemicals, like, yeah, I mean, you kind of did.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a nice little side by side. If I can get my finger out of the way.
Oh yeah,
that's
and
cool.
Back to what we were talking about earlier about like this other version of Batman that he's talking to, this personification of his fears and egos. This other version tells him like about the day he first arrived in his mind, like when he first there. And every time we do a Bruce Wayne flashback, we always add an extra wrinkle or do something extra with his parents. And in this story, we get a flashback to like a Christmas Day where Bruce gets the Zorro action figure from his parents. He gets his dad a tie. And in this story, that's when Martha gets the pearls from Thomas, but Bruce says like he helped pick them out. That probably contradicts some early Batman story I'm not thinking of, but this specifically says it was Christmas. And the reason why they say that this is where his fear first showed up is Thomas Wayne gets a call about this patient who's dying and it's an emergency, he needs to go, but he takes Bruce with him. And Bruce is waiting in the car and gets bored. And when he goes in, like he sees this man dying and Thomas fails to save. So there's a lot to read into that scene. Like this is a person that Thomas failed to save and has died. This is the first time Bruce has seen death. And this is when fear arrives. And there's a great moment where Bruce asks him, like, is everyone going to die? And Thomas says, yes, but like not until it's their time. And Bruce asks, are you going to die? And he says, oh yeah, that's a long way away. And then it's like a few weeks later, his parents get shot. So his father promises him, I'm not going to die anytime soon. Don't even worry about it. And then he dies. And that really...
What a liar.
Yeah.
But no, I'm glad you got us to there, because I love that segment. I like getting to see what this version of Bruce's like childhood was. But I laughed really hard when he gives him this tie, which is the ugliest fucking thing in the world. and Tom's just like, thanks, son.
Well, and it's the least like Batman tie ever. It's like a palm tree with sun behind it.
Like,
it's like
there's nothing.
It's
just...
It just shows how innocent Bruce was back then.
Martha, you couldn't have helped him pick out a better present?
And that's now for talking about like our preferred versions of Batman. I prefer the idea that Bruce is first confronted with death when his parents are killed and him being purely innocent before that. So this adds an extra wrinkle to that. That's like not like quote unquote my Batman, but in the context of the story, it totally works. Like I think it works right here.
I really think it adds to, you know, his fear of death. I really like that idea.
I don't have a definitive take on the origin personally. I like the idea of like he is aware of death, but for him, it's something that he doesn't have to worry about yet because his dad told him so. Then now it is something you have to worry about.
So like, my dad was wrong.
Also, I love the way Darwyn draws Robin.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is this the only Batman book he worked on?
No, he drew.
Well, there's some other stories in the book.
And Ego and other stories.
Did he ever have like
other stories?
We're only talking about Ego. We're not talking about and other tales.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Pause our discussion for a second. Okay.
Okay.
And other tales. Shouldn't that be Tales?
That's true.
It should. There's a reason he had to spell it like that, right?
Is it Catwoman?
I assume because Catwoman, because also because they also have Selina's big score in here, which is a pretty big story. That's actually I think longer than Ego itself. Yeah.
It's longer than the titular story. Okay, that's kind of dumb. But
there's I think there's one other Catwoman story in here. Yeah, the one that's drawn by Tim Sale.
But anyway,
so I don't know.
But the point of my question was asking: is there any other books like Ego that he wrote and drew himself for Batman?
For Batman, I mean, the last story that's collected in here is one, but it's actually a remake of an older story from the 70s.
Yes.
Yeah, the one that's called Deja Vu, right at the end.
Yeah, the 70s story is called Night of the Stalker. That was like an early Batman comic for him, written by Steve Englehart, and he says that's his all-time favorite Batman story. And this, I think, was written and pitched also as like an episode of Batman that never got developed, and then he made it into a comic called Deja Vu. So yeah, that's something written and drawn.
I think there's not a lot of dialogue in it. I think it's a really like simplistic and powerful rendition of that story.
Yeah, I still need to read those. And so yeah, I think he wrote and drew more Catwoman than he did Batman. Because there's a whole bunch of other Catwoman stuff that he drew but didn't write. That's not collected here.
This collection is also kind of Catwoman heavy, as I was saying earlier.
Yeah, but and of course, like the big thing he's known for is writing and drawing New Frontier, which Batman it is in. Like it's not a Batman story, but Batman is in it.
Right.
Because man, I'll tell you, I want to see him. I wish we had gotten a just Cooke Batman run, like a long. Yeah. I want to see his take on like the whole Gotham, city. Englehart. The Dago says Englehart Batman is peak. I would love to read and review that stuff some point.
Yeah, me too.
I still have to read Strange Apparitions, I think it's called.
I've heard great things about it. So we get, kind of, I don't want to say origin, but, we go into that origin territory, which I feel like I should be sick of at this point, but I'm not.
It's done really well here.
Yeah.
And this just lines up great. Like, I don't know what order you would read them, but with stories like Batman Year One, Dark Knight Returns, like this snugly fits well, like with those types of stories. Stuff where we bring up the origin a lot, but it's always relevant to the present story.
The Dago says Batman is also barely in New Frontier, which is sad because his Batman looks good. That is sad because I've seen clips of the animated movie, and I think he looks good.
Yeah,
I'd say he's still kind of important, but like he doesn't get a lot of screen time.
Yeah, I'd have to reread it, but I think like pretty much everything with Batman in the comic is in the movie. But then there's tons of stuff with other characters that's in the comic that's not in the movie.
Yeah.
So his presence might feel a little bit.
And I mean, he had to juggle a lot of characters too.
Mm-hmm.
With that, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up Robin though, because presumably this is just referring to the Dick Grayson version. So this is still like kind of early Batman, but he's at least had a first Robin so far, at least. Because you might be like, if for a first time reader, you might think like, oh, this might be shortly after year one, like, and then you realize, oh, okay, there is Robin here. So he's been doing stuff for a bit, but this other Batman Sphere tells him like, oh, you got soft, like we were striking fear into the hearts of criminals. You know, we were above the police, we were above the law, and now you're working with the police. Now you have partners, and now you have this kid companion, and it's Bruce making the case for why allies are important and why he has this person. And there's a great moment. I don't know if this is deliberate foreshadowing on Darwyn Cooke's part, where Batman Sphere like throws him, maybe literally or maybe just in his head, into the cases or the display cases with the suits. And what was the line that
the Christmas Carol reference?
Yeah, there is a Christmas Carol reference, and then he says that his fear tells him like, if you ignore me, you're gonna regret it. And when he says we get a close up of the Robin suit, and it's a little torn now, and I take that as a Jason Todd reference to his death. Oh. Like I don't know if I'm reaching, but I take that as, if you ignore me, if you don't kill the Joker, more things are gonna happen. And as we know, Joker's gonna murder Robin, because he even like says something about like putting this kid in danger, and Bruce is like, he can. And of course, we're talking about Dick, but he still says like, oh, he can take care of himself. He's stronger, something like that. But that's how I read that scene. I could be reaching, but I thought it was interesting.
No, I kind of like that read.
Because that is definitely, because that is a potential consequence for keeping the Joker alive, for not killing him.
The Dago says New Frontier is more about Flash and Green Lantern. Rick Flag Sr. as well. I do like some Green Lantern.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, and Martian Manhunter. Martian Manhunter is a big.
Yeah, Martian Manhunter is a big part of it. Yeah. Something interesting. Another interesting thing I was thinking about this story is that I know like there's this common perception that like Batman, when it comes to Batman and Bruce Wayne, Batman is like his genuine self, and Bruce Wayne is the mask that he puts on. And like to some extent I see that, but I also think it's way more complicated than that. And I think this book, delves into that, why it's more complicated than that. Because like Bruce Wayne is a person, and he, created the Batman persona because of the trauma he had. So it's not. It's hard to say like who is the main person and then who is like the mask that he's putting on.
Yeah, to quote Eric from an old Geekvolution episode, animated series and Batman Begins specifically are definitely the closest to like my ideal favorite version of Batman, where he, quoting him, and I agree, like I see Batman as three people. There's the Batman mask, there's the Bruce Wayne mask, and then there's a guy in the cave who talks to Alfred, and that's the real guy. Somewhere in between, or like all encompassing. So that's my favorite version, is like there's three guys. There's the Batman mask, the Bruce Wayne mask, and then there's the real guy, who we rarely see, or is only really himself around very few people like Alfred.
And I think that's why it's so interesting to explore the duality between Bruce Wayne and Batman, even though, I think it's not as simplistic as a duality. It is really just there's three. I think the more accurate interpretation is there's three guys. There's Batman, there's Bruce Wayne, Bruce Wayne's like public persona, and then there's someone in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his fear in this story offers him a way out, leaning into the multiple personality angle of just let me take over. You can be Bruce Wayne during the day. Let me take over during the night and exact vengeance and consume you. And that's the temptation that Bruce has to deal with. It's about him restraining himself from going all the way, being consumed by vengeance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's what I was trying to say earlier too, is that it's too simplistic to say like Batman is the real person, because you need the humanity of Bruce Wayne, and that's what this story is all about.
This is the book that everyone who says Batman should just start killing people needs to read.
Yeah.
Because what I like about this is it's not a one-sided conversation. This is what the fear has a point of like, this is why you should let me do this and this and this. And yeah, maybe there would be short-term benefits, but then Bruce explains, well, no, this is why that's a bad thing. This is why I don't do this.
And I don't know if you guys agree with this, but the one kind of criticism I do have near the end of this story is I do think that the fear maybe agrees with Bruce too quickly at the end. It feels like they come to a compromise a little too quickly by the end, just to have it all be wrapped up. But I don't know. That's just kind of a feeling I get. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
I was going to ask you that because I also had it. I was like, so you spent this long trying to intimidate him, even to the point where he puts the gun that killed his parents in his hand. I'm trying to find the right panel. And then he's just like, no, I'm still not going to do it. And then you're like, okay.
Yeah, he's just like, all right.
I've read this story 2 or 3 times. Similar to you guys, it was a story that Matt Reeves referenced about being an inspiration. I had never heard of it before, so I got it and read it and really liked it. But every time I've read this, the ending does feel a little rushed. Like, oh, I could have used a couple pages here. Or it suddenly like occurs to you like, oh, I'm at the ending now. That's at least my experience reading it. Like, oh, that ending like really stuck up on me fast. So I agree that part could have been a little longer. But that sequence is great though, because it brings the whole thing full circle, where it starts with a guy who kills himself out of fear of what the Joker could do to him and his family. And what Batman's fear tells him is, if you want to be free of me, this is the only way to do it. Like, the only way Batman can free himself of his fear is to kill himself. And he doesn't do it. And that's just so great. And there's a lot to unpack there. And Batman saying, no, I'm not going to give in to that fear. I'm going to use that fear. But I'm also not going to let that consume me either.
Yeah.
No, I don't disagree. It's a shame because I feel like everything prior to that is so perfectly paced and everything feels so meaningful and purposeful, and then it feels like he just ran out of page count or something.
It does feel like it's maybe wrapped up a bit too quickly. But I mean,
that's this great panel.
Oh yeah, that looks great. I mean, this is essentially a story about the negative,
Egos.
like why about ego.
Yeah, it's a story about ego.
About why you shouldn't let your fear take over, because at the beginning Buster is someone who lets his fear take over. He commits a horrible atrocity by killing his family. It's still in order to protect them from the Joker, because the Joker would have done way worse things to them, but still, like, he murdered his family and then killed himself. And so that's what happens when he lets his fear take over. So Bruce is not gonna commit the same mistake, and he's reminded why he is Batman.
And he's not gonna quit being Batman either. Like, it's Batman's story about him kind of getting his mojo back and his motivation back, where that's the compromise him and his fear reach is, I'm still not going to go there. I'm still not going to break my rule, but I'm not going to quit being Batman either. I'm reminded why I do what I do, and I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep fighting as long as I can.
Yeah, no, it's, again, it kind of circling back, it reminds me of scene right in Dark Knight Returns, right after he's nearly killed by the mutant leader, and he's like, "No, you're not done with me yet. You're never done with me," and that kind of revitalizes him.
Mm-hmm.
And in a similar way, I think this is a more drawn out version of that, which I think he had to have been looking at that. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Batman book in the last 30 years that's not looking at Returns.
Yeah, and so it's a very influential book.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just very sad, just thinking about how, not counting the animated stuff, how short of a run we had with Darwyn Cooke. I mean, this is published in 2000, and he dies in 2016. Like, relatively speaking, that's not like a huge amount of time, but what he did publish that time with his Catwoman stuff and New Frontier, it's like there's so much great stuff we got from him. It's just just one of those great creators just taken from us too quickly.
Yeah,
from lung cancer. And I guess we should. Oh, sorry. Did you have something?
No, I mean, he was gone too soon.
And absolutely. And for anyone wondering, like, okay, well, Matt Reeves says this is something he was looking at for the Batman. Where do you see that? I think that's the most apparent at the ending, where he literally says, like, Batman is horror and fear for criminals, but he has to also be a symbol of hope for the good people of Gotham. And that's like all what the ending of the Batman is. Like, it's not word for word the same thing, but there's big similarities with the ending just in terms of the themes.
And though, like, word for word. Batman.
Yeah, it's similar for sure.
That's why Reeves listed this, right? Is that ending?
That's my guess.
Well, no, also just, thematically, I think. I mean,
thematically?
Thematically.
Thematically? That's how I'm going to say
Thematically?
Thematically.
Tomato. It doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know.
It's very thematically of you.
That doesn't even make any sense. No, I mean, they're both stories about Batman learning that, or at least the Batman, it's him learning that he needs to be a symbol of hope and not just pure vengeance. It's a similar thing with this because he's like avoiding fear taking over and just him being a symbol of just pure fear. But it's not really him learning that for the first time in this. It's more so like him reminding himself. Whereas in the Batman, it's like he's discovering he's learning that for the first time because that's a much younger Batman.
Reeves very much took this and kind of applied it to a year one Batman. Or year two, sorry. That's year 2, I think. All right, so
early days.
I feel like we're kind of getting into a circle here, so we're going to move on. Does anybody have anything else they specifically wanted to bring up with this book?
Yeah, I got one more thing.
Okay.
Go for it.
Where's Alfred?
Good question.
Where the hell is Alfred?
He's with Carmen Sandiego.
And wait, in the flashback with when Bruce is a kid, there's a really old looking butler. I'm like, that's not Alfred, right?
Yeah.
That's an extremely old looking dude. So I'm going to assume that's not Alfred.
I had that this time where I was like, was Alfred like just a super old dude and he's just not around when Bruce is Batman? Like, I don't know.
See, I feel like because we get very little time in the actual cave before the main drama starts. I feel like Alfred's asleep or something. Because you don't see Dick or anyone else either.
Just imagine Alfred coming downstairs to the Batcave and seeing Bruce just having a complete mental breakdown.
That's Tuesday.
Yeah.
And the other thing we didn't mention about the ending, though, is when Batman gets his mojo back and goes back into Gotham, it's because Joker, who was captured at the start of the story, has already broken out the same freaking night and has taken hostages in Batman. So it's just that cycle of violence, and this is a dance. Joker.
What is Austin yelling about in the chat? What?
It's a reference to an AVGN episode. I don't know why he's saying that.
But yeah, it's all about that dance with him and the Joker and just that cycle. And again, it's up to the reader to decide. Like, maybe Fear has a point. Like, if he killed the Joker, this would stop happening. I think this fits really well with Killing Joke and just like every classic Batman Joker story.
Mm-hmm.
This comic could have ended with him going off like to fight any other villain, but they make a point of saying, Joker's captured at the start and he's already doing this again. Batman's got to stop him.
Well, I think Fear does have a point, but ultimately the reason why Bruce chooses to still be Batman is because like it's what he has to do,
Yep.
Yeah. No, I like that it begins and ends with the Joker. It's that setup and payoff.
Exactly.
All right. Robert, did you say you had two things or just the one?
Oh no, I think that was it.
Okay. I'm just gonna kind of wrap up with general thoughts. This is a must read for any Batman fan. The art is excellent. I can't speak for other tales. I don't know how many tales they have, but the other stories in this book I have not read yet. I definitely want to check out that last one, the Darwyn Cooke remake of that Steve Englehart story.
Yeah, and for anyone curious, that again, Darwyn Cooke said that was his favorite comic, and it's called Night of the Stalker from Detective Comics number 439. And his remake is called Deja Vu. And if you want to find that Night of the Stalker story, it's in a Steve Englehart collection. It's also in the Greatest Batman Stories Ever Told trade, which is really easy to find. I need to reread that because I do have that trade. But there's some great stories, and I do need to read his version called Deja Vu.
Yeah. He talks about that in the foreword to of my version as well. No, I have some of the Englehart stuff. It's unfortunately not all well collected. But I'd like to read that story. I'd be curious. All right.
Yep, same here.
Is that kind of everything we wanted to talk about?
I think we do ratings next.
We do ratings, although I was thinking, it's kind of hard for me to rate a comic. Like we did kind of the ratings last time, but I think we might do something a little different going forward when we're doing comics, Torgo. Let's just stick with a simple, would you recommend this?
Sure, yeah. It's a definite yes for me. This is in my top 5 favorite Batman stories. I love this book so
right up
much.
there with I Am Suicide, right?
I don't hate I Am Suicide, but it's not in my top 5.
No, it's your number 1.
I like Tom King's Batman more than you do. We can talk about it some other time.
Oh God, I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think this, more than a lot of other Batman stories, dives deep into the duality between Bruce and Batman.
Between the Bat and the Man.
Between Bat and Man, in one of the most compelling ways I've ever read. So, absolutely, if you're a Batman fan, check this out. I think it's required reading if you like Batman at all.
Robert, would you recommend Batman Ego?
Absolutely. It is very good.
I am giving this a very strong recommend. If you're at all a comics fan and or a Batman fan, whatever, read this book. It is awesome. As always, that is just for the Ego part. We cannot talk about other tales.
For sure.
I recommend Deja Vu because it's very good.
And I read like There Be Monsters or something. It's a black and white one that he drew but didn't write. It's a very short story, but it's very good. And so, subject, do you want to tease what we'll be back at in 2 weeks?
Absolutely. So in 2 weeks, next week we will be doing Haven of Horror. Torgo, you will have to remind me what that movie is that we're doing because I've forgotten.
Burial. It's that movie that somehow
the movie that doesn't exist.
That neither of us picked, but we're watching it.
A fake movie.
But next week we'll be back on Haven of Horror to get one step closer to finishing Shutter Shuffle. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be doing our first commentary on the channel, Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition. It'll be a 3-hour commentary. I love that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Torgo is more leaning kind of positive, but there's things he doesn't like, I think. And
no,
Robert,
I'd say leaning negative, but there's things I like.
Okay. And then Robert, I don't know where you fall on that movie.
No, we'll see in a couple weeks.
Okay, he's not going to tell us. What a rat bastard. No, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun. I'm going to be on my own in an island, but that's okay. But yeah, we will see you guys back here in 2 weeks. And then Torgo and I will try to get together at some point to do some more Asloom. Got to get back to the Asloom.
Yeah, we got to go back to the Asloom.
Asloom.
To meet Bone. Actually, no, we already beat Bone.
We beat Bone. Next is who is after Bane? It's not Ivy, is it?
You go to the Batcave. I don't think Ivy's. Maybe it's Ivy after you're in the Batcave. I don't remember.
Ivy's wait, are we talking about Arkham Asylum?
Actually, no, yeah. Ivy's the second to last boss, isn't she?
Yeah, she's near the very end.
But there's not that many bosses in Asylum.
Well, you fight Croc. I don't think you fight Croc right after the Batcave part. I don't know. I'm not as familiar with Asylum as the other games. But.
Austin, I don't remember what's the next fight after Bane. You know that game.
I don't remember if it's Croc or Scarecrow. I don't remember which one.
Well, Scarecrow is 3 fights.
Yeah, the Scarecrow stuff, yeah. Yeah, it's probably another Scarecrow fight.
Yeah, because we did the first Scarecrow.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It'll probably be the second
Austin
one.
Austin says disgusting. Does that mean you're not going to come on for the BVS commentary, Austin?
No, Austin hates that movie.
Oh, there's the Titans between Bane. Okay, so it's Bane, the Titans, and then Croc.
Remember the Titans.
Okay.
Remember
the Titans. Yeah.
Let's do a commentary on that. That's my favorite Batman movie.
Oh, Batman movie.
that and Clash of the Titans. That makes it a great marathon.
You don't fight Zaz again, do you? I thought it was just at the beginning.
No, yeah, you just sneak up on Zaz at the beginning. You're thinking of Arkham City, where he has his own side mission?
I don't know, but anyway, we will try to get to some Asylum as soon as possible. I'm not going to promise a date. Torgo, you just message me when you're free, and we will hop into the Asylum. But yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
See ya. Oh wait, Austin's right.
Yeah.